I ruined my ex-boyfriend's life 20 plus years ago, and I just made sure it stayed ruined. When I was in college in the 90s, I met Jake, then M23, through mutual friends. He had already graduated and was planning to move to the opposite side of the United States for grad school, and I had already been making plans to move with friends only a 90-minute drive away from where he was moving to. We had so much in common, fell in love, and it really seemed like fate, both planning to move 3,000 miles and landing so close together. He had 2 sisters and a younger brother who were all awesome people, and I became instant friends with them as well. Because he was in school and I was working, I would usually go to him to hang out on weekends. He was renting a house with 2 roommates, also in his program. We were young, so money was tight, but we had fun, went for taco dates, and spent a lot of time at his house where he was breeding and selling small animals. Jake was in animal sciences, PhD student, so being around animals was normal and I loved it. I met and became friends with his advisor's wife, Mary, F. mid-50s, who worked in administration at the university. She is a lovely woman, and I would often have lunch with her when I went over on weekends. Jake was a teaching assistant, TA, and I met other people in the program and made friends with them faster than he did. After about 2 years of dating, I was at the house one day, laying in bed together, in a state of some undress, and he said out of the blue. He was concerned I'd been gaining weight, and it made it harder for him to be attracted to me. No concern about my health. It was all about him finding me unattractive. I sat up and said, well, then maybe you should make sure there is better food for me to eat than crackers and cheese when I come up on weekends. Even at 23, I didn't take that kind of BS. I had gained maybe 10 pounds since meeting him 2 years earlier, and still wore the same size clothes, about a US size 6 to 8. I wasn't going to engage in a fight about it after all. It was his problem, not mine. So I asked him calmly, so what is your solution to this? He stared at me blankly and said, well, I guess that you should try to lose weight. And I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. So what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I guess nothing. I wanted to let you know how I feel. And I said, cool, thank you, put my clothes back on, went to sleep, and drove home the next day as usual. We keep dating, and about 3 months later, he called me and said he wanted to break up after close to 3 years. The reason, and I quote, you don't know enough about science. He felt like he couldn't have a conversation with me about his work where he didn't have to use common names for animals instead of scientific ones. I said, well, that's bullshit. What's the real reason? He said it was the real reason. He came to see me a month later to return something of mine, and I confronted him, demanding the real reason. He finally admitted he had been seeing one of his undergrad students, let's call her Meg, a 19-year-old. He was then 26, and her teacher. I screamed at him to leave. My roommate threatened to throw him off our second-floor balcony if he didn't go, and he left. It hit me all at once after he walked out, and I went from rage to stunned laughter. I'd met Meg a few times, and at one point she was at his house for a BBQ and spilled something all over her pants. Jake asked me if I could loan her some sweats. I couldn't because I was a size 8 and she was a size 18. Nothing wrong with that, at all. But the point is, I realized he made those comments about my weight to try and get me to break up with him because he was a coward. He clearly liked a big gal. Although, when he'd said those things to me about my weight, it was 1 a.m. I lived about 95 miles away, and we had just had sex, so I don't know how he thought this would go. Even in hindsight, it perplexes me. Did he think I was going to break up with him and storm off into the night and drive for an hour and a half? Anyway, I emailed his roommates. It was the early 2000s. It's how you communicated anything you didn't want to say on the phone. I wanted to let them know we'd broken up and that they were always lovely to me, and thanked them for being friends. They both admitted they knew about Meg and were the ones to demand that Jake tell me or they would. That's when he broke up with me with the lame, you don't understand science excuse. One of his roommate, a super nice, super cute guy named George, offered to help me get a few things still at their house that he had collected for me away from around the house. He suggested I come up for the weekend, we go out and drink, and have a good time. All the things Jake didn't want to waste money on, and I said, sure.